By the time Lydia Thornton was ordered into the snow, the charity box had already vanished. The old beggar woman was wearing Lydia's only shawl, and every important family in Newport had decided which version of the story would be safest to believe. Madame Celeste Voss stood beneath the green and cream awning of her Bellevue Avenue salon, with diamonds at her throat and triumph hidden behind concern. Snow drifted against the brass threshold. Inside, beyond the half-open door, music had stopped. 100 candles burned over ladies in silk, bankers with watch chains, railroad wives, shipping heirs, and descendants of old Federalist families who had learned to make cruelty sound like manners. Lydia stood below them on the icy step. She was 23 years old, a parlor maid, daughter of a dead seamstress, and poor enough that the gray wool shawl now wrapped around the beggar woman had taken her 2 winters to mend into usefulness. She had given it away because the woman's hands had been blue. That was the whole crime at first. Then Lord Percival Strake made it larger. He was standing just inside the door, one shoulder against the carved frame, a glass of wine untouched in his hand. Newport called him Lord Strake because he had arrived with English vowels, a signet ring, and enough contempt to pass for pedigree. Lydia had never believed him. Men born to rank rarely needed to mention it so often. "Madame," Strake said, his voice carrying beautifully into the corridor, "I warned you that sentiment invites disorder. A servant who mistakes herself for providence may soon mistake your silver for her wages." A murmur passed through the guests. Madame Voss lowered her eyes as if wounded by necessity. "The subscription box is missing from the front table." Lydia looked at her. "Then search me." The murmur changed shape. Madame's brows lifted. "You forget where you stand." "No, Madame, I know exactly where I stand. Outside, where you put me. In front of witnesses, where you chose to accuse me. So search me here." Lydia raised her hands, palms open. "Search my apron, my sleeves, my room, the kitchen shelf where I keep my soap. But search everyone who stood near that table too." Miss Alida Crane laughed from the doorway. She was lovely in a hard, polished way, with dark curls arranged to look careless, and a mouth trained to wound without moving much. "How democratic. This is America," Lydia said. "We pretend to value that." Several men looked away. Strake smiled. "Careful, Miss Thornton. A clever tongue is expensive in a woman who cannot afford reputation." The old beggar woman, hunched beneath Lydia's shawl, shifted slightly. Lydia felt the movement beside her more than saw it. The woman had appeared under the awning half an hour earlier, trembling, asking whether there might be stale bread from the kitchen. Carriage after carriage had passed her. Ladies had lifted their skirts. A deacon's wife had said loudly that public begging encouraged moral weakness. Lydia had watched from the service corridor until shame became heavier than fear. So she had stepped outside. Now the old woman's gloved fingers closed around the $3.17 Lydia had pressed into her palm. 2 months of tips saved. Toward new boots. Strake's eyes dropped to the coins. "And there is the money." "My money," Lydia said. A parlor maid with $3 in coin on the same night, a silver charity box disappears. A gentleman with a false title standing near the same table. Lydia answered. "Should we call that coincidence too?" The silence that followed had teeth. Madame Voss's face hardened. "You are dismissed. I was dismissed before I opened my mouth. You will leave this house at once." "Not until the box is found." Strake set down his glass. The tiny click against the marble console seemed louder than the wind. "Madame, permit me to summon a constable. The girl is overwrought." "No," Lydia said. He turned toward her with pleasant surprise. No constable chosen by the nearest gentleman. Send for the city marshal if you like. Send for Mr. Barlow from the county court. Send for anyone whose fee is not already in your pocket." A flush touched Strake's cheekbones. It vanished quickly, but Lydia saw it. She had been trained by poverty to read what the rich believed invisible. A thumb rubbing a ring, a key hidden beneath lace, a glance toward a curtain before a lie was spoken, and there it was. When she mentioned the court, Miss Crane's right hand moved toward the green velvet drape behind the subscription table. Not to her throat, not to her heart. To the drape, Lydia turned at once. "Thornton," Madame snapped. Lydia pushed past her. Someone caught her sleeve. She twisted free, crossed the corridor, and lifted the curtain. The silver box sat wedged behind the carved table leg, wrapped in a gentleman's handkerchief marked with a blue crest. The room inhaled. Strake did not. That mattered. Lydia lifted the handkerchief and stared at the embroidered arms. A lion, a coronet, a motto in Latin stitched too neatly by someone who had copied respectability from a book. The lion faced the wrong direction. The coronet had the wrong number of pearls. Her mother had once repaired linens for 2 old Rhode Island families and taught Lydia the difference between a family mark and a costume. "This is not an English crest," Lydia said. "It is a mistake wearing silk." Strake moved then, not toward Lydia, toward the old beggar woman. Before he reached her, the front door opened hard enough for snow to blow across Madame Voss's polished floor. Adrian Hartwell stepped in. He was not a duke, though half of Newport treated the Hartwells as if the Revolution had forgotten to finish with them. His grandfather had built ships for the Union blockade. His father had turned river docks and rail contracts into a fortune. His mother's charities fed more women than most churches, and embarrassed more trustees than most courts. Hartwell House stood above the harbor, with its white columns and old elms, and men who mocked titles still lowered their voices when its name entered a room. Adrian removed his gloves slowly. His eyes went first to the old beggar beneath Lydia's shawl. Pain flashed across his face so sharply Lydia almost looked away. Then he faced the room. "Who put my mother outside in the snow?" The effect was immediate. Mrs. Cushing dropped her lorgnette. Madame Voss's lips parted. Miss Crane went white beneath her rouge. The beggar woman straightened. The torn bonnet came off. Grey hair, pinned badly on purpose, revealed a pearl comb. The stoop left her shoulders. Augusta Hartwell, widow of Hartwell House, founder of the Hartwell Women's Relief Fund, and the most feared old woman in Rhode Island philanthropy, stood in Lydia's shawl and looked over the guests as if taking inventory of rot. "I put myself there," Mrs. Hartwell said, "to discover why money meant for injured seamstresses, widows, and working girls has been vanishing after passing through fashionable hands." Her eyes settled on Madame Voss. "This young woman gave me warmth," she continued, touching the shawl. "You gave me performance. Mr. Strake gave me orders. Miss Crane gave me her back. All of you gave me evidence." Strake recovered with impressive speed. That was the first moment Lydia understood he was truly dangerous. A fool would panic. Strake smiled as if the floor had merely shifted to a more interesting dance. "Mrs. Hartwell," he said, bowing, "had you announced yourself, every door in Newport would have opened." "Yes," Augusta said, "that was precisely the trouble." Madame Voss pressed a hand to her breast. "Surely there has been a misunderstanding. If funds are missing, we are all victims of confusion." "No," Lydia said. Every face turned again. She should have stopped. A dismissed maid did not contradict a salon keeper before railroad men and old families. But her mother's voice lived somewhere beneath her ribs. "Fine rooms repeat what fine people say. Listen for what they hide." Lydia held up the handkerchief. "This was placed to be found after I left. Miss Crane knew where it was. Mr. Strake did not breathe when I found it, and Madame Voscos has kept the relief ledgers locked in her library since Tuesday. Though the public accounts are due tonight, Adrian Hartwell looked at her, then properly looked, not at her cap or apron or cheap shoes, at her mind. "What is your name?" he asked. "Lydia Thornton." His expression changed almost imperceptibly. Augusta heard it too. "Thornton?" Lydia's fingers tightened around the false crest. "My mother was Marianne Thornton." Madame Voss made the smallest mistake. She glanced at Strake. Lydia saw it. So did Adrian. 6 months earlier, Lydia had entered Madame Voss's salon through the servant door with one trunk, 2 references, and a talent for disappearing before anyone important remembered she had a face. She learned the house by its sounds first. The front bell had 3 moods: impatient money, timid ambition, and debt pretending to be friendship. Madame's step clicked faster when creditors came. Strake's laugh carried farther when widows were present. Miss Crane's perfume always arrived before she did, orange blossom over something bitter. Madame Voss sold refinement to people who had already bought everything else. French conversation, piano evenings, etiquette lectures, charitable committees, introductions to men with names old enough to disguise new money. She turned social hunger into invoices. Lydia dusted the lecture room, carried coffee, mended torn gloves, copied menus, and corrected the household accounts. Because cook could count onions, but not Madame's tricks. By the 2nd week, Lydia knew the salon earned more from private introductions than from music. By the 3rd, she knew Lord Percival Strake signed promises with a title he never used at banks. She kept quiet. Quiet kept a roof overhead. Then she found the first name. Elise Moreau, a singer with a voice like glass underwater, wept in the back passage after Madame cancelled her winter performance. Strake had offered to protect her career if she became agreeable. Elise refused. By morning, a rumor had reached every drawing room that she drank before singing. Lydia did not comfort her with empty words. She stole 5 minutes in the library and checked the concert ledger. Elise's fee had been marked paid. It had not been paid. Beside the entry was a small blue thread caught in the paper's fold. The same shade as the thread tying the packet of letters Lydia kept beneath her mattress, her mother's letters. Marianne Thornton had been a seamstress with a sharp eye and 2 ruined fingers. Years before, she had applied to the Hartwell Women's Relief Fund after a factory cutting machine crushed her hand. The claim had been approved, delayed, reopened, and finally denied by an intermediary named P. Strake, who wrote that Marianne was unsuitable due to doubtful character. Her mother had died believing shame had defeated proof. Now Lydia began reading every scrap of waste paper before it reached the stove. She found more names. A widow from Providence persuaded to invest in a non-existent steamship route. A teacher from Fall River charged for a placement that never existed. A girl with watercolors whose scholarship vanished because Miss Crane wanted the exhibition wall for herself. Small thefts, Strake had understood, were safer than one large one. Shame was the lock. Class was the key. Adrian Hartwell entered the salon on a wet Thursday afternoon and nearly ruined Lydia's habit of invisibility by noticing her. He came for the relief ledgers, not for Chopin, though Madame placed him beneath the best chandelier and ordered 2 pianists to make culture suffer for his benefit. He was 34, tall, controlled, and tired in the way men become tired when they inherit not merely money but the sins of everyone who managed it before them. Lydia brought coffee. Strake greeted Adrian like an equal. "Mr. Hartwell," he said, extending a hand. Adrian looked at the hand half a second too long before taking it. "Mr. Strake." My solicitor has been unable to locate your London references. London is full of lazy clerks, so is Newport. Lydia almost spilled the coffee. Later she found Adrian in the library, facing Madame's locked cabinet. You should not be here, she said. No, he answered, but I am beginning to suspect my family's money should not be either. That made her look up. He did not smile. Do you know these ledgers? I know the dust on them. And what does the dust say? That the public books are handled once a month. The private books are handled every week. Madame turns pages from the upper right corner. The other person turns from the bottom. Ink from 2 hands. Pressure from 3 moods. Instead of laughing, Adrian listened. That unsettled her. Men usually enjoyed cleverness in servants only when it could be turned into convenience. Adrian did not ask her to steal a key. He did not flatter her into danger. He simply said, "If you ever choose to tell me more, I will not pretend I discovered it myself." Respect was more dangerous than condescension. Condescension could be hated cleanly. Respect asked to be trusted. Lydia did not trust him yet. She trusted evidence. 2 nights later, she followed Madame's errand boy to a printer near Thames Street and saw him collect embossed certificates bearing a fake British seal. She did not confront him. She bought a penny sheet from the same printer's trash boy and found the test impression beneath an advertisement for patent soap. The day after that, Miss Crane cornered Lydia in the linen room. "You are clever," Alida said, trailing one finger over folded napkins. Clever girls from nowhere often mistake attention for opportunity. Lydia kept folding. Do they? Mr. Hartwell has a habit of pity. His mother collects broken women the way other women collect china. Do not confuse being useful with being wanted. Lydia placed the last napkin on the stack. "Is that what happened to you?" Alida slapped her. The blow turned Lydia's face, but not her eyes. Alida's own eyes filled with hatred, too old for the insult. "You know nothing. I know you wanted Hartwell House to fund your women's art school. It was not charity. It was vision. Then why help Strakes steal from the women your school claimed to serve?" For a second, Alida looked less cruel than cornered. Then the mask returned. Because doors do not open for vision. They open for leverage. That was the story of the whole salon. By the night of the snow, Lydia had enough fragments to suspect a machine, not enough to break it. Augusta Hartwell's disguise supplied the missing pressure. Strakes' trap supplied the mistake. After Lydia found the silver box, nobody left the salon. Adrian closed the front doors himself. Augusta ordered the kitchen fire lit for every servant in the house, then asked Madame for the library key. Madame gave a wounded laugh. "This is still my home, and perhaps soon evidence," Augusta said. Strakes' charm finally sharpened. "Mrs. Hartwell, you risk scandal. A public quarrel over charity accounts will injure the very women you wish to help." Lydia stepped forward. "That is how you kept them quiet." He turned slowly. "You have a remarkable appetite for ruin. No, I have watched you feed on it." Madame moved then, almost invisibly, left hand toward the chatelaine at her waist. Lydia caught the motion. "The key," she said. Adrian's eyes followed. "Madam." Miss Crane bolted. Lydia ran after her, not through the corridor but through the servants' passage, because rich houses showed one map to guests and another to those who kept them alive. She cut through the pantry, slammed the baize door open, and struck Alida's wrist just as the woman tried to thrust a packet into the stove. Paper scattered across the tiles. Alida clawed for it. Lydia caught her sleeve. Alida drove an elbow into Lydia's ribs, hard enough to steal her breath. Still Lydia held on. "You little fool," Alida hissed. "He will say you forged all of it. Then we had better keep your fingerprints on the soot." Adrian arrived in time to hear that. He did not touch Alida until Lydia released her. That mattered too. The packet contained drafts, copied seals, and a list of women ranked by usefulness, vanity, isolation, and available funds. Beside Marianne Thornton's name was a note in Strake's hand. Approved, payment diverted. Claimant unlikely to pursue. Daughter minor. Lydia read the line once. The room moved far away. Adrian said her name. Not Miss Thornton, Lydia. She looked at him and saw guilt break through his control. My father's trustees hired Strake, he said. My house gave him access. Yes, Lydia said. He flinched, because she did not soften it. Good, she thought. Let truth cost something. Augusta came in behind him and read the paper over Lydia's shoulder. For the first time all night, the old woman looked her age. We thought delays were clerical, Augusta said. You thought poor women would wait politely while gentlemen checked ink, Lydia answered. A servant would have been dismissed for less. A desperate woman might have apologized immediately. Lydia did neither. Augusta bowed her head. Not much. Enough. Then teach us how not to repeat it. That was the moment Lydia's anger changed shape. It did not become forgiveness. It became strategy. They could have gone to court that night. Adrian wanted to. His solicitor was a carriage ride away. The city marshal could have taken Strake before midnight. Lydia refused. If you arrest him in a back room, he becomes a gentleman persecuted by Hartwell money, she said. Madame becomes deceived. Miss Crane becomes hysterical. The women he ruined become rumors again. What do you want? Adrian asked. The room that protected him. Lydia said, must watch him fall. 3 nights later, Hartwell House opened for its winter assembly. Every invitation had been accepted. Newport smelled blood and called it civic concern. Lydia entered by the front door in dark blue silk Augusta had insisted was armor, not charity. The gown did not make her a lady. It made refusal harder. That was enough. Adrian met her at the foot of the stairs. You do not have to do this, he said. Yes, I do. You have already done enough. No, I have survived enough. That is not the same thing. He took the correction quietly. Then tell me where to stand. The question nearly undid her. Not I will handle it. Not trust me. Where to stand. By the east door, she said. He will choose that one if he runs. It leads to the conservatory, then the side drive. Adrian nodded. And my mother, with the widows. He fears documents. Madame fears women who stop being embarrassed. A faint smile touched his mouth. And where will you be? Lydia looked toward the ballroom, where Madame Voss was already arranging her face into innocence, and Strake was laughing with a banker's wife. In the middle. Augusta began the evening with a speech on charity so graceful that half the room relaxed before the blade appeared. Then she invited Madame Voss to read the public accounts of the Hartwell Women's Relief Fund. Madame opened the ledger. Page 1 was harmless. Page 2 was not. Lydia had copied the true figures beside the false, not as accusation but as arithmetic. Names, dates, amounts. Initials of women who had been shamed into silence. Mrs. Fairholt stood first. My sister's trust paid that sum. Elise Moreau stood next. My fee was marked paid. I never received it. A teacher from Fall River rose with a receipt in her shaking hand. Strake laughed. A theatrical ambush. How very modern. Lydia stepped forward. Yes, she said. Theater is useful when liars depend on curtains. He bowed slightly. And you are the star, I presume? No, I am the witness you mispriced. His smile became thin. She laid the false crest on the table. You claimed English blood but copied arms from a stationer's sample. You promised investments but signed no bank paper under your title. You redirected relief funds through administrative fees approved by clerks who no longer exist. You used Madame Voss to identify women with money and fear. You used Miss Crane to carry invitations because respectable women open doors to other respectable women. And when I began to notice, you placed the charity box where I would be blamed. Prove it, he said. That was his counterstroke. He produced a paper from his coat and handed it to the nearest banker. A statement from Lydia Thornton's former employer. Theft, dismissal, moral unreliability. Like mother, like daughter, the room turned toward Lydia with renewed hunger. For 1 second, the accusation found the child in her. The girl who had watched her mother cough blood into a handkerchief and still apologize for staining linen. Then Lydia saw the ink. She began to laugh, not loudly, not sweetly, enough to make Strake's eyes narrow. My mother's employer lost his right hand in the factory fire of 1868, Lydia said. He signed afterward with a left-handed mark witnessed by 2 clerks. That statement bears a right-handed signature dated 1871. The banker looked down. Lydia continued. And the paper is from the Thames Street printer who made your false seals. He trims the lower edge unevenly because his cutting blade is nicked. Every sheet in your packet has the same tooth. Adrian opened the east door. A thin man in Clark's black entered. Abel Finch, Strake's former copyist, whom Lydia had found through the printer's trash boy, and persuaded not with money, but with the names of the widows he had helped ruin. Finch confessed badly at first, then completely. Dates, banks, false seals, diverted payments, Madame's private commissions, Miss Crane's lists, Strake's borrowed title. Strake ran exactly where Lydia said he would. Adrian was waiting by the east door. The city marshal was waiting in the conservatory. Madame Voss sat down before her knees chose for her. Miss Crane did not cry. She stared at Lydia with hatred and something worse. Recognition. When the marshal took Strake, the room did not applaud. Applause would have made them participants in justice. Silence allowed them to pretend they had always disapproved. Lydia preferred the silence. It showed more. Afterward, in the winter garden, Adrian found her beside the frozen fountain. I am sorry, he said, for Strake, for my house, for money that moved without eyes, for charity that expected gratitude from women it failed to protect. Lydia looked at the ice crusting the fountain bowl. Sorry is a door. It is not a room. Then help me build the room. She turned. He did not reach for her. He had learned that too. What room? One where women do not need a family name to be believed. One with ledgers they can read, lawyers they can afford, work tables, presses, music rooms, exhibition walls. Not rescue, access. Her throat tightened. That was my mother's word, she said. Access. Then we will carve it above the door if you wish. Months passed before Lydia married Adrian Hartwell, and in those months she did not become a fairy tale. She testified in court. She sat with solicitors until legal phrases stopped sounding like locked gates. She helped Elise Moreau recover her fee, Mrs. Fairholt recover her sister's trust, the Fall River teacher recover her placement money, and 17 seamstresses recover payments they had been told were lost to process. Newspapers tried to make her simple. Angel maid, ambitious servant, beauty rewarded. Cinderella of Bellevue Avenue. Lydia refused every version that removed her hands from the work. When she became Mrs. Hartwell of Hartwell House, Newport still searched for a title grand enough to explain why she could not be dismissed. Some, with mockery at first and then unease, called her the Duchess of Bellevue. Lydia never used the name. She did not need it. Her first public act was not a ball. It was the opening of the Thornton rooms on a cold March morning. A house of work tables, legal desks, music rooms, printing presses, clean fires, and front doors wide enough for women who had spent their lives entering by the back. Augusta Hartwell came early and hung Lydia's old grey shawl in a glass case near the entrance. Beneath it, Lydia placed no jewels, no crest, no sentimental verse. Only a line carved in oak. Nobility is not the name above your door. It is what you do when another soul is left outside it. That afternoon, a young seamstress arrived with cracked hands and a roll of drawings tied in blue thread. She hesitated at the threshold, looking toward the side alley out of habit. Lydia opened the front door herself. "Mrs. Hartwell," the girl whispered. "I was not sure which entrance was meant for me." Lydia looked past her to the street, where the last snow of the season had begun to fall. Soft, bright and merciless. Then she smiled and stepped aside. "This one," she said, "always this one."